basketball family is the strongest there's ever been, there ever will be.
Eight up freehand, King rights the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot, good, off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout, but the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Benny.
With 20 seconds left to play, goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys Podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the Roy's Boys Podcast. Today we are joined by a special guest, former Tar Heel player Larry Miller. Larry, how's it going today, man?
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for the call.
So the first thing I'm going to ask you first off, before we get started here, is COVID has kind of taken all of our lives and put it on hold. How have you stayed busy, stayed sane during the last 5 to 6 months during the coronavirus?
Well, fortunately, it happened during the growing season, and I have a wonderful garden to tend to, so I spend an awful lot of time outside in the yard. And then I have a few friends that we kind of, get together every once in a while just to, break up the monotony. But we stay, pretty well behind the rules.
Oh, well, that's a good year. I've seen a lot of pictures of you in your garden. It does look very beautiful, and you've done a really good job. So we'll get down to business. You committed to Carolina despite growing up in Catasauqua, Pennsylvania. What was it about Chapel Hill and Dean Smith that attracted you to playing basketball in the South and in the ACC?
Well, basically, on my visit to Chapel Hill, I met some wonderful people, and to a T, they were all real genuine, good, solid people. And the atmosphere itself was conducive, too. It was just the southern charm of Chapel Hill, I guess you want to call it. And so I was really attracted. Billy Cunningham, Bobby Lewis, recruited me, and Coach Smith and Coach Roseman. But just the general atmosphere of the place was beautiful.
You mentioned how your recruitment was recruited by Bobby Lewis, Bobby Cunningham, and Dean Smith. What was your recruitment like? Because I imagine recruiting in the 60s was a lot more different than the recruiting we have in 2020.
Yeah, it was pretty hectic. And unfortunately, one of the visits was right after JFK got killed as president. Out to Michigan. Now, that was a dead visit because, everybody was so saddened by that event. And, but there was a lot of pressure. People would call you up and ask you to make a commitment. One guy asked me to make a commitment. I was only a junior. And, they'd call all the time. They'd show up unannounced in your driveway. And some people even showed up without a college. So they just were in the midst of getting a college coaching job. So it was pretty, crazy.
Did you ever consider attending Duke or NC State, or was Carolina the only school you were coming down south for?
No, actually, Carolina, the day I chose Carolina, I wasn't sure who I was going to choose up until the time I chose them. So it was a coin toss right till the end. I was close to Coach Bubis and some of the guys at Duke, and I had visited over there. But I guess just the atmosphere at Duke, came down to the atmosphere at Carolina was so much more relaxed. And to the day I graduated, I was so close to Coach Bubas, I couldn't open a letter he had sent me after I had chose Carolina because of, I didn't open it until after I actually finished playing at Carolina.
Well, Larry, we're definitely glad you chose the lighter shade of blue to play for the Tar Heels instead of the Blue Devils. Now, when you got to Carolina, freshmen weren't allowed to play on the varsity team at that time. Therefore, in Chapel Hill, freshman basketball was a popular thing. When they opened up Carmichael, the freshman team actually beat the varsity team. What was your experience like playing as a freshman?
Well, we didn't get to go to where the varsity played all the time. Sometimes they would play, and we would play a game at a different, college because they might have been going to Georgia or somewhere like that. So it was kind of so-so. I mean, I wanted to play. I wanted to play right away, and I felt I could have played, but those were the rules, and everybody played up to those rules at the time. But we did have I think we won the championship as freshmen, even though a lot of the guys that were on that team, didn't really play that much later on. But we did ended up being pretty good as freshmen.
Now, when you got to Carolina, Dean Smith wasn't yet established as the Dean Smith he came on to be. He recently got hung as an effigy after a loss to Wake Forest. Do you remember there being any pressure maybe on you or the team to win games, or your coach was going to get fired?
Well, I don't think we ever thought he was going to get fired, but I think that basically we felt like if we didn't get some help, we weren't going to be any good. And that, fortunately for us, the situation, Bobby was there, then he got me there, then we got Dickie and Rusty and Bill and Joe and Tuttle and those guys, we brought them all in. And then we got Charlie and Delaney and Fogler. So it was that concession of players and the timing of it that really started everything. I mean, it wasn't – I get a lot of credit for that, but, I mean, I was there, obviously. But if it weren't for the other guys coming in afterward, we still needed them to make this thing work. And fortunately for Carolina, it did happen.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Your recruiting classes in the mid-'60s really built the foundation that he was able to create the greatest college basketball program that we've ever seen after that. So you mentioned when you got to Carolina, you thought you were ready to play, but you had to sit because of the freshman rule, so you play on the freshman team. And your first season, you averaged a double-double at 20 points and 10 rebounds per game. What allowed you to enjoy so much success so fast? Was it the system that he put you in a position to make plays? Or was it just the fact that you could put the ball in the basket and grab rebounds at a consistent and efficient level?
Yeah, that plus the fact that I was a hard worker, and during a game I never stopped moving and working. So I think the fact that and I played hard in the summers coming up to college ball. And that when I got in his system, I just fit it perfectly because I didn't have to score to be effective. I mean, I could set picks, I could rebound, I could play defense, give assists out, and all that stuff. So I felt comfortable in the game, and it didn't bother me that I didn't score a lot of points as long as I was in there and helping the team play and win.
You mentioned that you didn't have to score to be an effective player, but yet you still averaged over 20 points per game in your Carolina career. And this was out the three-point line. So what were your strengths of scoring the basket? Could you get inside? Did you shoot long-range shots, mid-range shots? How was your offensive game so effective during that era of basketball?
Well, I could do both of those things. I could score inside and outside, and that's what gave me an advantage. I was able to go inside with the big guys, and I could also go outside and shoot, from a three-point line, basically. Although it wasn't a three-point line, I could shoot at top of the key. So, I had the option of going inside or outside, and that's what gave me the advantage.
Now, you mentioned playing with Bobby Lewis, and together y'all two formed a great tandem, and y'all got nicknamed the L&M Boys. What was it like playing with Bobby, and what kind of teammate was he?
Oh, Bobby was the greatest. I mean, he was my idol. I actually saw him play in high school up here in Allentown in the Benet Brisk tournament, and I think he was the MVP there. And I was excited to be able to go down there to visit with him and meet him, and then actually join him as a teammate. So he was a pleasure and a very good person, a humble person. And matter of fact, I just spoke with him the other night on one of these interviews, and he showed up, and it was great to see him and his wife after all these years. But yeah, it was a pleasure.
Now, as we mentioned early, when you got to Carolina, things weren't yet established. Things were a little uneasy around Chapel Hill. Your final 2 seasons, though, y'all really turned the page, making it to the Final Four, and it was a turning point for Dean Smith. Now, while the Final Four wasn't then what it is now, what was that experience like playing on college basketball's biggest stage?
Well, it was pretty interesting. And it was kind of like a conundrum, basically, because we had back then the ACC tournament was the biggest thing around. I mean, it was bigger than the NCAA tournament. It was the most pressure. 3 straight days of playing games, and you had to win every one of them to be able to go to the Final Four, to the playoffs. So, in essence, when we made it to the Final Four, we were already played five playoff games to get there. And my senior year, we won 6, and we lost the 7th one. So I think we're the last team to win that many games and get to the finals. But it was it wasn't as big as the ACC tournament. That's what I'm trying to say.
Let's talk about the ACC tournament. It was back then. It was more local, being played in the Carolinas. What was it like going into a packed gym every night, knowing that if you wanted to make the NCAA tournament, you have to win these games? A lot of times you're playing your rivals in Duke, State, and Wake Forest, and those guys in Maryland, and those guys were pretty good too. I imagine those games were pretty intense, and there was a lot of competitive fire displayed on the basketball court.
Absolutely. That was the most intense time in my entire career in all the years was that ACC tournament, because matter of fact, I wouldn't even allow my parents to come because I said I cannot spend any time with you because it's so pressuring for me. Before the games, I was a wreck. I just wouldn't be around anybody. I'd walk around, the hotel or outside and, just get ready for the game. And that was 3 straight nights of that. And by the time it was over, my gut was all torn up and I couldn't sleep for a day or two. And I just get in the car and ride around. And fortunately, we were able to win a couple of them. So it was a tremendous feeling. But it was an intense pressure, the most I've ever felt.
There was another thing that was big during your time, and that was the Dixie Classic with the Big Four schools, where y'all would invite other top area teams from around the country to come and play in Greensboro or in Raleigh. What was that experience like? Because once that went away, they haven't even tried to bring it back, and that was a big staple of ACC basketball back in the 60s.
Yeah, but we never really played in – I think that was at NC State. They kind of were getting away from that when I got there. We did have some big games in Greensboro. They tried to emulate it, but it never was kind of like the original Classic where they played all those teams. But we enjoyed the competition coming in and playing us there.
Let's talk about Coach Smith for a little bit. Everyone has their favorite story of the legendary coach. What was yours? Was it something recruiting? Was it practice, an in-game situation? What's your Dean Smith story you could tell us?
Well, there's so many of them. He was just such a great guy, but we had some conflicts up and down there. But my favorite is that this was after I quit playing. I mean, after I quit playing, in pro basketball. I was living in Raleigh, and we would try to get together every year for a lunch somewhere along the line, wherever I was or wherever he was, if we were close. So we were going to meet at the Research Triangle somewhere. Well, I knew some of the other players were over that way, so I told about 5 or Donnie Moe, Greg Campbell, Joe Brown, Dickie, I think, was there too. And I called them all up and I said, we're going to be eating at this restaurant today. And so why don't you all meet us over there, but come one at a time and be walking in different directions. and just stop by the table and say hello. And then when he did that, Coach Smith invited them all to have lunch with him.